This is You're Probably Right. Entertainment first, everything else is just bonus. Opinions, all ours. Sometimes backed by research, but never the final word. There are always exceptions, so take it with a grain of salt and a slight dusting of chili powder.
Hey, what's up, y'all? This is MCM, and you're listening to You're Probably Right podcast. This is episode 351. So far, so soon. Not really. Modern dating has become sampling. Welcome back to You're Probably Right. You know, beyond actually the episodes that I've done for this episode, I've been doing some reading, and it's kind of weird what I've come up with. You see, it's become, apparently, we've reached the point where there's enough dating terms to fill a whole dictionary at this point, and to ask me whether or not I can hang on to every new catchphrase, every buzzword, every definition, not a chance. You see, ghosting, which is when somebody simply disappears without explanation, or ghostlighting, which is when somebody disappears, comes back, and acts like nothing happened in the first place, almost making you feel unreasonable for ever even bringing up the situation in the first place. Then there's breadcrumbing, which is giving somebody just enough attention to keep them interested without ever intending to actually move forward with them in the first place. Or how about orbiting, which is when somebody no longer wants to be with you, but somehow still watches every story, every post, and even keeps tabs on your life by sometimes asking people who know you and them. How about monkey barring, which is when somebody starts lining up the next relationship before they've done completely left the first one with you in the first place. Or situationships, which are relationships where people enjoy many of the benefits of commitment without actually committing. And then, of course, avoid and discard, which is the newer term for somebody slowly withdrawing from a relationship instead of directly ending it. As a matter of fact, usually people who've been, victim to that type of a situation usually have no clue when everything went bad or when things actually ended. But they did, in fact, end, whether they wanted them to end or not. Now when I first really looked it up, all of these definitions, some I needed to understand a little bit more about, although they're very simple. I didn't think people actually had suddenly discovered new things. And the funny thing is, because it's sometimes so difficult to keep these definitions in your mind, sometimes they actually will, once somebody twists you around their little finger with the little nuances of these new buzzwords, you'll actually start believing that you've learned something new. My first thought was that somebody finally gave names to behaviors that have existed forever. People have always disappeared. Sometimes it was just to the next block, a couple streets over, back in the day when there was no internet, no cell phones, no devices. Back when people were divisive with no devices. People have always had backup plans. People have always strung people along. People have always avoided difficult conversations. People have always wanted the benefits of commitment without the responsibility that comes with it. You see, the behavior isn't new. The vocabulary is new. That's it. And the more I thought about it, the more I started realizing that all of these terms might actually be describing the same thing. Not ghosting, not breadcrumbing, not situationships, something deeper. I think modern dating has become sampling, you know? And to give you a proper analogy, which you'll probably be able to understand and, I guess, um, appreciate, sorry, think about something like Netflix or Prime Movies or Crave or whatever it is that you pay into every month without actually having a physical copy, proof of anything. You know, I come from the time when to have a movie or to watch a movie, you would either have to have cable or watch it on something called UHF, or you'd actually have to have a tape or a CD. Whether it was music or a movie, you had to have a physical thing, unless you were just watching or listening whatever was being broadcasted through the local broadcasting system or the cable that you pay for. But nowadays, hardly anybody has physical copies of anything, and I think there is something to be said. Now, hopefully, you can follow me a little bit here. So let me go back to it. Think about Netflix, right? You sit down at night, afternoon, whatever. Maybe it was your day off and you thought for the 5 days you've been at work, all you wanted to do was have a day off so you could sit down and watch a movie on your local streaming provider, right? So, as I said, you sit down intending to watch a movie, let's say. So you scroll, you stop, you read a description, you say, oh, that sounds familiar. Actually, you know what? I think I saw this. It's a good movie. I wouldn't mind watching it. But then maybe you watch a trailer, maybe you don't, maybe you just go in your mind's eye and remember, oh yeah, I remember this happens, this happens. You remember seeing it before. So then what do? You move on. Then you do it again and again and again. An hour later, right? Or 5 months later, or 5 years later, get it? An hour later, you've watched absolutely nothing. You've invested time into thinking about investing time, about investing time, and about thinking about investing time, while investing time in thinking about investing time. You've sat there and all you've done is consumed, but all you have consumed is short windows of time added upon each other, or you've consumed, in this case, previews, not movies. Now think about YouTube, or Facebook, or Instagram, or TikTok. You click on one thing, right? 15 seconds later, you're on to another thing. And then you probably rifle through a few things that you don't even waste your 15 seconds on at this point. Everything's microwaved. You're just sampling little pieces of things. Instead of getting the deeper understanding, you're getting hot takes on something, right? So then what do? You go on to another, and then another, and then you look up, and 3 hours later, or 3 years later, get it? You've consumed hundreds of clips, hundreds of pictures, hundreds of profiles, right? But almost nothing in depth. I think dating has become exactly that same thing. People aren't dating, people are sampling. Sampling conversations, sampling personalities, sampling chemistry, sampling possibilities. A few texts here, a coffee date there, a month talking to somebody online there, a few weeks talking to somebody from work, an ex who suddenly reappears, a person from Facebook, a person from church, person from the gym, a person from dating apps, whatever. Everybody is talking. Everybody's exploring. Everybody is keeping their options open. You know, the sad thing about that is, and I'm just going to say it before I really get into it, but have you ever had one of those days, going back to Netflix for a second? Have you ever gone back and really thought, you know what? When I was 7 flicks in, I probably should have stopped there. Because when you look back, or when you finally settle, you settle on something you probably didn't really want to see, and something that you might have seen before, or a personality that you've been around and a personality that you've experienced before. So you settle in on what is normal and what is regular for you. You didn't actually give the option that you should have given, the time of day, you know? The reality is, very few people seem to actually be building anything. And here's the interesting part. One of the biggest questions people are asking today is why people won't commit. Women are asking it, men are asking it, people in their 20s are asking it, people in their 40s and 50s are asking it. Why won't people commit? Why are situationships becoming the norm? Why do people disappear? Why do people come back? Why does it feel like everybody has one foot in and one foot out, like the hokey pokey? Meanwhile, nothing but hanky panky going on. And I don't think the answer is actually simple. Well, maybe it is. You know, I can't just say, men are doing this, so therefore this is happening to women, or women are doing it. So I think the reality is, I think both sides are doing it, probably for different reasons. And I could probably give you a few for each side, right? I know men who can't commit. I know women who can't commit or don't. I know men who think somebody better is one swipe away. I know women who think someone better is one swipe away. I know men keep backup plans, and I know women keep backup plans. Comfort people, people in their past that they can always fall back on. You know, for the first time in human history, almost everybody has access to almost everybody. The world has become a lot smaller. Sounds crazy, right? Until you realize that too many choices can become a problem, you know? Going back to the TV analogy again, think about it back in the day, some of you who know what it was to actually have to get up, turn the television dial to a channel that they know, and hope that something that comes on every week at the same time is going to come on this week. So back in the day, if you were a kid, you knew exactly what's coming on your favorite cartoon channel, or the channel that shows cartoons at a certain time on a Saturday. You know that if you didn't tune in between those 2 or 3 hours, then you've missed it for that week, period. But now we've come to the point where everything is available at all times. As a matter of fact, somebody can be available at all times, always, because the world has become smaller, that maybe you talk to somebody on your side of the the neck of woods right now, and then whether you have to work the next day, guess what? You could be talking to someone who's just waking up on the other side of the world, right? Like if you were in Toronto and you're going to bed, right, at say 10, 11 o'clock, then you realize everybody in your area is going to bed at that time. Well, guess what? You also know 5 people in England, and they're just waking up 5 hours ahead, right? So Saying all that to say that, the more choices people have, the harder it becomes to choose. Back in the day, you choose somebody from your church, choose someone who goes to the same school, choose someone you work with, choose someone who lives on the same street or in the same building, right? Or someone you met at a certain place that you frequent every week or something like that, right? The more options people have, the harder it becomes to commit because every commitment requires giving up another possibility. And if you're forward thinking, then you're always thinking there's another possibility down the road. Therefore, maybe you try a few things out. And at the end of the day, maybe you choose wrong. And modern culture hates giving up possibilities. Everything around us encourages us to keep looking. So, the next video, the next show, the next phone, the next job, the next opportunity, the next city, the next person. Eventually, people stop asking, is this person good for me? And start asking, can I do better? The problem with that question is that there is always somebody better if you keep scrolling. And somebody younger, somebody richer, somebody more attractive, somebody more successful, somebody who appears to have fewer problems. The key word is appears. And that's why I'm saying, with all these choices, think about how many times when you've had all of those choices in different avenues of life, and then you realize that you settle because time was actually really winding up for certain parts of your life, and you chose wrong. Or you're choosing wrong. Who knows? Because the reality is, nobody is perfect once you actually get to know them. And I think this explains something else I've noticed. After years of searching, many people eventually return to something familiar, right? An old relationship, an old cycle of abuse, something they saw from their parents, someone who they knew in their early 20s, an old friend, an old conversation, an old possibility. Sometimes they return because they finally recognize the value that was there a long, long time ago. Sometimes they return because they're exhausted, tired of introducing themselves, tired of first dates, tired of getting to know someone new, tired of uncertainty, tired of disappointments, tired of starting over, tired of looking. And that's why I don't think commitment is actually the problem. I think giving up options is the problem. Nobody wants to give up their options because commitment requires deciding. Commitment requires declining. Commitment decides, and I guess commitment requires focus. Commitment requires choosing. Commitment requires accepting that no matter who you choose, there will always be another option somewhere. The irony is that many people spend years trying to avoid making the wrong choice. And they think the way that you avoid making the wrong choice is to actually just make no choice at all. But I'm sure many of you have come here and realized that that's not the choice to make either. only to wake up one day and realize they've never made a choice. And that's where I wanted to start today. And I'm really just going to honestly answer a few questions for you, keeping it very simple. Because if modern dating has become sampling, right, then maybe we need to talk about what happens when people spend years watching previews, but never sit down long enough to actually, well, to watch a movie. So the question is, simply in my opinion, guys, and again, I don't pretend to know everything, right? The question is, why do people ghost? And I think we've answered it pretty much here. I think the reason is some people want to keep their options open. So they think they can do better. So they go out trying to do better, right? And then someone might ask, okay, well, then why did they come back? Well, obviously, they go out picking here and picking there and picking there and picking here, picking all over just to find out that they didn't find anything and they ghosted a bunch of people. And the sad thing about that is, I know a lot of people who've left, for lack of a better term, trails around everywhere. I mean, I know people who you can walk into a mall and it'll be like, okay, how did you know that person? They waved at you, they smiled at you. Okay, well, yeah, I dated that person. And those are the people who were seriously getting around. Just keeping it straight. There are some people who literally go around to various places and they see a lot of people that they used to know, like the song says. And then someone might ask, okay, well, why situationships exist? And it's just for that reason. People are going about sampling all over the whole place. And sometimes there's very bad situations that come out of these situationships. Sometimes it's unplanned pregnancies. Sometimes it's a bunch of small, I'm not going to call them situationships. I'm going to call them a bunch of failed relationships because people always figure that they can just level up, change directions, and meet somebody else without trying to see something fully through properly, trying to stay with where you're at and try to fix it, because sometimes the problems aren't as big as they seem when you're in them if you step back and actually try to fix them instead of just moving on. Well, that person doesn't have a good dress style, or that person doesn't have a good job, that person doesn't make enough money, that person isn't tall enough, this person isn't this enough or that enough. So they move on to the next one just to find out that what they left wasn't as bad as they made it or thought it to be in the first place. So sometimes they come back, right? And, I think we've answered again why commitment feels harder. And the reason why is because the world has become smaller. And with the world becoming smaller, people feel like they have a lot more options because population has gone up and the reach that you have now to talk to different people has expanded. Right. And I guess the question is whether mixed signals are actually mixed, and I would say they're not. And the sad thing is, I guess there's mixed signals, but at the same time, I think because people are locked in this thing where they can do better, right? For various reasons, they can do better, that they really don't give things a chance. So, what ends up happening is people give mixed signals to a few different people, and then finally, by some sort of process of elimination, these people who are giving all these mixed signals tend to stumble on something that sounds and seems like it makes sense, or something that seems, for one reason or another, familiar. So they check that box and they stay for a lot longer than they did with those other people that they left all those mixed signals for, just to find out that in many cases they finally settled on something that they shouldn't have settled, and something that they knew the way things would probably end. But because it was familiar, they settled, sometimes not knowing why they settled. What emotional availability actually looks like. I think at the end of the day, what that actually looks like is you have to be willing to be hurt, to be fully emotionally available in the first place. If you always have your guard up, if you're always trying to come out on top, if you're always trying to protect your feelings or your emotions or whatever, then you really haven't given anybody a chance. And sometimes many people who actually open themselves up tend to open themselves up to the wrong person. And usually, for a lot of people, it is staying in a pattern or a cycle of some sort of abuse in many cases, sadly. So, in other words, somebody seemed like they were nice, but not quite right. But then you go off and you find somebody that you're used to. And sometimes the person that you're used to, that you settled for, is usually someone who things didn't, either that person or someone a lot like them didn't work out for very good reason. But because it's something that you're used to, you fall back on it. It's kind of weird. It's kind of like, that old saying about man looks in the mirror, walks away, and in a short time forgets what he looks like. It's kind of that kind of sad syndrome. So I would say, first of all, having too many options are making people miserable, because you'll not stop, or maybe you'll stop for a second and then you'll move on, and then you'll stop and then you move on, and you stop and then you move on. And as I said before, you'll get to stop number 23 and realize you should have stopped at number 7. But because you got used to your pattern of moving on, you moved on. And then finally, I don't know, maybe biological clock, childbearing age or earning age or whatever it is, something makes you stop, and sadly, you tend to stop at the wrong place. Anyhow, at the end of the day, because I'm going to make this as short as possible, I think I've given you enough food for thought. Just think about why you're making the choices that you're making. Think about the people who you've hurt. Think about the people that you've rejected. Think about the people who you've started relationships that you probably never should have started, or think about the people you ended relationships with you probably should never have ended. And just think about it. And remember that in all you're getting, get understanding. In all your knowledge, really, really think about what you're doing. Because there is that chance that you might leave someone you should have stayed with and stay with someone you probably should have left a long time ago. Anyhow, guys, this has been another episode of You're Probably Right. I am MCM. Take care. Hey, come check out You're Probably Right podcast. Society is getting more unpredictable every day, but at the same time, predictable in its unpredictability. Say that 4 times real fast. Come with me as I attempt to find clarity in all the fog while staying way outside the box and kicking the box way down the road with my size 12 ducks. I use the Bible, experience, education, fortune, misfortune, life's lessons, life's mistakes to sort through all the mess. I talk about news, God, God, self-help, sports, sickness, health, music, parenting, love, humbleness, hurt, pain, joy, and all the things that might make you say, I never thought of it that way. Hopefully, anyway. Also, I take a stab at answering tough and not so tough questions, and all the while understand that, listen, Sometimes you end up in the hot seat and there's no thermostat. Well, that's how it is here. And because there's no topic, well, very few topics off the table, Torontonians will understand that Doug Ford reference there. Hopefully, the podcast will be helpful and uplifting. And hey, maybe you'll find your own private Idaho here somewhere. Hope to see you soon.